Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Sher. Welcome. It's time to square off. Let's meet our panel. Here he is, our professor, Rick Vatz, talk show host, the amazing Dan Joseph, former Baltimore mayor, Sheila Dixon, a regular here on Square Off, and attorney Billy Murphy. Good to see you all. No jail time for former city state's attorney Marilyn Mosby, convicted twice, first of 2 counts of perjury, then 1 count of making a false statement on a loan application. The judge imposing a penalty of 3 years supervised release with 1 year of home detention, wearing a location monitor device, plus 100 hours of community service. Prosecutors had asked for 20 months of incarceration. U.S. District Judge Lydia K. Grigsby imposed no jail time, saying there had already been important consequences as a result of the prosecution, also citing Mosby's role as a mother of 2 daughters. Dan Joseph, your reaction?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy, and I think it's a really good thing for the city of Baltimore that Marilyn Mosby, Nick Mosby, that saga appears to be over. As far as the verdict or the sentencing goes, I'm not entirely sure. Here's the question I have. Would somebody who was not in Marilyn Mosby's position, who was not a state's attorney, just a normal person who got convicted of the exact same thing, would they have been potentially sentenced to 20 months in prison or 17 months in prison? Or was this a way of, did Sheila Dixon get some kind of special treatment here? I don't know the answer to that question, but it seems to me like
Marilyn Mosby.
What, I'm sorry?
You said Sheila Dixon. You meant Marilyn
I'm sorry, Sheila Dixon, Marilyn Mosby, my bad. Would Marilyn Mosby have been sentenced to that, or are they just trying to make an example of her? That's the question I have. Were they just putting this major sentence out there because they wanted to make an example of Marilyn Mosby, or was this the same penalty that just an average guy on the street would get? Yeah, there's some legal precedent to say you're a public figure and we're going to go harder on you because we want to send a message to other people who might do this. At the same time, if it's not fair, it's not fair.
Sheila, what's your take?
First of all, I think the judge and her decision was excellent. I think that giving her a home detention so that she could be with her daughters was a fair treatment. You know, when we look at this type of crime that other individuals, particularly white individuals and particularly white males, this is what would have happened to them. And I think it's only fair. And I think that it was fair. And I think the judge said it was very serious, but I also believe that in some cases, and I'm not going to pick at the different charges, but I think the case where she used some of her pension and had a hardship, I think that was not even worth the money that was spent to prosecute her on that. And so I'm happy for her. I'm happy for her family. She now can move to a new chapter in her life and decide what the next chapter is going to be.
Okay. Well, let's hear from Rick Vatz and then Billy Murphy.
Marilyn Mosby, in my opinion, is the pinup woman for the arrogant lawbreaker who was uninterested in anybody but herself. She tried to pressure the judge, and she was successful. She tried to make the argument there trauma to her daughter. She gets a letter from a therapist saying this would be awfully tough on her if she were incarcerated. Do you know how tough it is to get a letter from a therapist on something like that? It's almost automatic. And she lied to feather her own nest. She misled lenders. She was stumping for a pardon from the president. I think she is contemptible, and I think she's arrogant, and she certainly showed no remorse. And I think that she got off very easily.
All right,
So what
Billy.
sentence would you have given to her, Rick?
I'm sorry?
What sentence would you have imposed?
I would have invoked the sentence that they wanted, 20 months.
Billy, come on, speak up.
I think the judge, what we have to understand is that it's very hard to compare one person to another, even if they have the same guideline calculation, because everybody's different. And so there was a range of sentences here that would have been fair. Probation would have been fair. Home detention is fair. An 18-month or a year-long sentence in jail would have been fair. And the judge, I think, exercised her discretion to take into account that Marilyn Mosby's been punished enough. And so I think that this was a fair sentence. And put aside what she said, fair judges look beyond that. They don't look for an excuse to nail somebody. They look at all of the factors that go into deciding what kind of punishment, if any, is appropriate. And I think the judge did her job. It would have been snarky for her to have adopted the government's point of view. The government's point of view was extreme. And everybody knows that in this country, people usually commit 3 federal felonies a day without knowing it, because there are so many criminal statutes in the federal code. It's just unbelievable. So you got to take all this into account.
Dan,
Well, boy, you are incorrect on something. Let me say what the judge said. The judge
Wow, that
said,
wouldn't be the first
most
time.
significantly to this court, you are a mother of 2 daughters. She took that as a very significant portion of her decision to give her probation. So she was convinced by the therapist, as judges tend to be, even though this therapist, again, to get a
That
therapist
doesn't mean
to
she was
claim that you are
convinced by.
psychologically incapable of punishment, that is automatic. You'd never
Wait,
find a
just a
therapist
second.
who would refuse to
Look,
give such a
I
statement.
respect you, but you know very little about criminal law and how the criminal justice system works. What she was pointing out was something that is relevant whether there's a therapist or not. She is the custodial parent of 2 daughters. This is a traumatic experience for her and her 2 daughters. Of course, you should take that into account, unless you're going to be a bully.
Well, let me tell you this. My cousin was a judge in Allegheny County, okay? And my father was a lawyer. And so I'm not in the legal system, but I've heard these things discussed for years and years. And
Okay.
this is a cave. This is a cave to the defendant.
all right, hold on now, please. I would like to say that Mosby supporters had filled the courtroom. There was a petition that supposedly has 80,000 signatures of people supporting leniency for her. There was an overflow crowd in that courtroom. But Her Honor, to show Mosby recalling her efforts to reform the criminal justice system in Baltimore, Judge Grigsby ordered the 44-year-old defendant to, by the way, forfeit the Florida condo that she purchased with fraudulently obtained funds. Mosby can recoup the down payment and a percentage of the proceeds from the purchase. Before we conclude this topic, I need some reaction to this. Her final remarks, quote, "This is not over, but God was here today and I know he's with me. He touched the heart of the judge and has allowed me to go home to my babies." Dan?
Yeah, look, I'm sort of amazed by how similar this is. Obviously not in the level of the politician, but in terms of the circumstances to Donald Trump's case, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit. Obviously, both Marilyn Mosby, with allowing all those people in the courtroom and getting the petition signed, is trying to do something, or was trying to do something similar to Donald Trump, which is impact the public opinion on the trial and hoping that that actually would go to the judge. And I think in this case, by all appearances, it worked. And again, I think that there's a similarity in the sense that you have to ask the question, would these charges and would this punishment apply to anyone, or is it just to Marilyn Mosby? That's a very important question.
Sheila, what do you think about that question?
So I strongly believe that when you look at the judicial system, we have a huge problem, period. There is an imbalance of injustice based on the color of your skin and the way people are treated. And I think this is a prime example that those who came out to support Marilyn Mosby see it daily, every day. I'm not even going to go back to revisit my experience, but I do plan to do something as far as writing out what I went through and how I saw and what took place. But I believe that it was fair, and we have to change how the judicial system handles individuals. It's just like the Donald Trump case. I don't know where that's going to go or how that's going to end up, but believe it or not, I believe that he's going to end up getting off in that case. And so I think that it's time to move on. I don't believe that she should appeal this. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge. I think that it's time to put it behind her so that she can raise her daughters and decide on what the next chapter is in her life. But we've got to change the judicial system. And I think it was an attack too. I mean, if we go back to the Freddie Gray and the fact that she not convicted, but she brought those police officers before the court because of what happened. I think there's a whole host of things. And it's interesting that over the last 10 years or more, and believe me, when you're in public office, you see and you hear a lot. And I'm not the kind of person to pull people under the bus, but some of the stuff that I could share that individuals have committed and walking freely today, so it's, there's a discrimination between individuals. And okay. So that's my thought.
Let me say this.
Billy Murphy, let me say this.
Exactly right.
Billy. Sheila referred to a judge, which you were once, and an attorney, which you are still. So give us 30-second summary before we move on to Howard.
I would have given her probation, and if she wants to claim innocence, it wouldn't have bothered me one bit because she's a public figure. She has children. She has a motivation to betray herself or portray herself this way. But let's get back to the data here. The data is overwhelming that the federal system, especially in the Fourth Circuit, is biased against Blacks and Latinos. As late as 2017, Rick Vatz, there was a study of sentencing by the judiciary itself, which showed almost a 21% higher sentence for Blacks factor by factor than whites, and about 20% higher sentences for Latinos. And so racism in the system is a significant factor. And nothing has been done about that study. It was a 2-day story. And hold on now, you're going to get your turn.
Where was the study from, Billy? Where was the study from?
The judiciary itself, the National Judiciary.
That's pretty broad.
It was the federal arm of the judiciary that keeps all the statistics and does all of the studying to make sure that the federal judiciary polices itself. And so it was a study by the very court system involved in the misconduct.
Let me just say one thing since my name was invoked.
Rick, what?
Since my name was invoked, may I make one response?
Yeah, you were evoked.
When people claim discrepancies between how African Americans are treated and how whites are treated, they often make the argument, therefore, African Americans should be treated more lightly. That's not the answer. The answer is those whites should be treated more severely. When you've got a situation.
My God, that's such.
Well, Marilyn Mosby certainly believed that African Americans should be treated differently.
Say what?
All right, guys.
I think Marilyn Mosby certainly believed that African Americans should be treated differently.
We've got so much to cover today on our Square Off. By the way, you can tell your friends to tune in to squareoff.net. Here's the voice of Square Off. We'll be right back. Howard Mallison, go ahead.
Thank you, Rich. The way some people drive these days, auto accidents are on the rise. If your car's been in an accident, the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. That's why more and more people are trusting their auto repairs and auto maintenance to leading edge auto body and mechanical repair. They work on all makes and models, and they offer free pickup and delivery anywhere in the Baltimore area. So give them a call at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in the heart of Mountain Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. And also, Baltimore is one of the best diner towns in the country. And the most popular of all are the Double T diners. TT means totally terrific. For breakfast, lunch, or dinner, the Double T menu offers you so many choices, you're going to want to order everything. With locations on Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, Monday nights are lobster night at By the Docks in Middle River, all part of the Double T family. Back to you, Richard.
All right, leading edge, you can't go wrong. It's a fabulous place to get your car taken care of. All right, Donald Trump's hush money trial will conclude this week with closing arguments, Judge Juan Marchand's instructions to the jury, then the jury deliberations will begin with a verdict possibly reached as soon as May the 29th. Billy, what do you think about this?
Well, it's hard to, as a matter of fact, it's impossible to figure out the dynamics of a case when you haven't seen it end to end. It's certainly even more impossible to talk about a cross-examination, for example, of his ex-lawyer without actually seeing it. But let's have some fun and do it anyway. I think that this is a very interesting case because you have two lawyers on the jury. And I don't ever remember any case of any level of interest where you had two lawyers on the jury. It's just not done because
Really?
lawyers will dominate the discussion, and they can show superior knowledge, etc. And so, what happens if the two lawyers don't agree? You're probably going to get a hung jury. There are all kinds of possibilities because those two lawyers are on the jury, and nobody's talking about it.
As the court adjourned, by the way, for the Memorial Day weekend, Trump raged against Colombian-born Judge Juan Marchand, saying the judge hates him, adding, look where he comes from. Then he ranted about inflation and repeated an anti-Semitic statement that Jewish Democrats who vote for Joe Biden should have their heads examined. The jury verdict, by the way, could come down sometime this coming week. Rick, speak up.
Well, one of those looking over this case is Jonathan Turley, who I think is excellent, and he says that the judge is the most compromised. That Cohen was the most compromised witness in the history of the federal judicial system, and that the judge is clearly prejudiced, and he never should have let this go to the jury. And I'm convinced by him. I've never, I mean, I don't
convinces you.
I've never voted. Let me just one
Hold
second.
on.
I've never voted for Trump. I will never vote for Trump. But I don't see that there is any good argument in this case that he should be convicted in this case with a completely compromised witness who is the central witness, Mr. Cohen.
Sheila, then Billy, and then Dan. Sheila.
Oh, sure, her audio's off.
Yeah, I got it. I'm in agreement with that. That I think that compromised attorney that worked for him, that was a part of his team, and now who is on the defense end is not a credible witness. And I strongly believe that come the 29th, that he probably won't get convicted. Probably, and I agree with Billy, having two attorneys as jurors, they're going to dominate the whole situation. And then you probably have other jurors that are probably afraid to make any decision either way, because of how, I think that Trump is crazy because of how crazy he is and what they might think happened to them. I mean, I know it's all conspiracy, but I just think that he's getting too much attention and that we need to focus on the November election so that he doesn't win. That's my position.
Dan.
Regardless of what you think of Donald Trump, and I'm not a fan myself, I'm glad that there are two lawyers on this jury. And I think that those two lawyers will probably end up hanging the jury. Will probably end up voting either to acquit or split their decision, because this case is exceptionally weak. It's always been exceptionally weak. It's a case where most people can't even tell you what the crime was that's associated with it. The Alvin Bragg, I think, never should have brought this case. I think it's, and like I said, not a fan of Donald Trump at all, like Richard, but this entire thing is a miscarriage of justice.
Billy.
Well, Donald Trump is a known and proven serial liar. And one of the series of lies that the prosecution believes that he created with these false business records Now, there are two possible ways to handle this case, because what the testimony put on that you heard so much about was to convince the jury that these weren't just misdemeanors, these were felonies. If they are felonies, there's an enhanced penalty and an enhanced set of consequences. However, if you disregard Cohen, you still got the misdemeanors, and the misdemeanors are uncontested. And
God, I hate them.
so
Well, it's the felony that's the problem.
my
It's the felony
prediction-
that seems to be out of line.
well, that's a reasonable argument to make, because the felony is about relating these false business records to the campaign.
Right.
And so if you disregard all of the evidence that relates them to the campaign, what you still have left are misdemeanors for which Trump has put on no defense whatsoever. His only defense in this case is against the felonies, not the
Professor Vatz,
misdemeanors. And so I think that this is probably going to be a misdemeanor conviction.
The
But
statute of limitations is passed on the misdemeanors.
No,
So
that-
if
no,
it's just the misdemeanors, then he should
Rick,
be.
you don't know
But
what you're talking
let me just complete one point. The thing is that if he is convicted, because the jury can vote to convict irrespective of all of these issues, if he is convicted, that could very severely hurt his chances for the presidency, and that's what they want. And I think that may be effective. I think that's bad, even though I don't like Trump. But I think that could be very effective in defanging Donald Trump for the presidency.
all
But I
right.
mean, this is helping him, right? I mean, all evidence suggests with Donald Trump going up in the polls and Donald Trump out there every day, complaining, it suggests that people either don't care about this case, don't care that he's on trial, or they think it's lawfare. They think that this is unfair towards Trump.
There was a big breaking story toward the end of the week that Trump's main competitor, Nikki Haley, has said that she is now with Donald Trump. She will vote for Donald Trump, despite their intense and often personal rivalry. Haley has urged Trump to reach out to the millions of people who voted for her and not assume they'll be with him. Do you think she could be vice president on his ticket?
I
No.
think he has said she will not be, and I think she could be. I think
Here's what
Nikki, I'm a big supporter of Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is one of the most prepared people to be president that I've ever seen. I think she's extraordinary. And I think that her joining the Trump team may seem incongruous to people after all they've said about each other. But I don't think it's impossible that he would choose Nikki Haley as vice president, even though he said, I will not choose Nikki Haley as the vice president.
I agree with Richard. I think that that she probably could be a possible candidate for vice president. It'd be interesting to see what happens. Well, it's just like Theroux coming on board with me towards the end of the campaign. But I believe that there's a possibility of her coming on board as vice president.
I think
Hey,
she has a
Sheila.
plan. I think she has a
Sheila.
full plan here.
Congratulations.
The plan is that she wants to be Secretary of State. She was a former UN ambassador. I don't think she wants to be vice president. I think she wants to be Secretary of State, and there's good possibility that Trump will put her in that position. I think at the convention, you will see her make a full-throated endorsement of President Trump. All that bad blood will disappear. Trump will forgive her, and she's probably a Secretary of State candidate.
There you go.
Trump needs her supporters.
Yeah.
All
The
right,
knock
guys.
on Nikki Haley has long been that she is an unprincipled politician and human being. And this is an example of it. If she really meant what she said about Trump, she wouldn't have endorsed him. And so this is a black mark on her as yet again folding instead of being a principled human being. So I have no confidence in her. She's also not an anti-racist, because she denies the racism in her own state and in this country. You can't be an anti-racist if you're in denial about racism. And whenever she's asked directly whether this is a racist country, which it is, because there are too many people who are racist in this country, and we all should be able to accept that as a fact, she doesn't accept that. And so I have nothing
Are these
to say
racists in the room with us now, Billy? Are they here?
I don't know any of you well enough to accuse you of that.
Yeah, no, that's what
And
I'm
I
saying.
don't make those allegations
It's
like
easy to say racism is everywhere. It's a lot
Wait,
harder
wait
to
just a
say
minute.
there's racism.
well,
Well,
just a second.
there's
If black people
there's
don't know
hatred
who
everywhere.
racists are. Look,
The
look,
hatred
if
in this
black
country has
people
gotten out of control.
look. One thing that I have that you don't have is an expertise in racism. And Donald Trump is a racist. Now,
One
if
thing you don't
can't
have is the
accept that
ability
he-
to look from it from an outside perspective.
Hold
You're
on,
very
just-
biased in favor
Okay.
of the idea that America's a racist country.
Yeah.
You don't have the ability to look at it from outside.
It's a fact.
Those are your set beliefs. Donald Trump is a lot of things, okay? I've never
So
heard
you're
Donald
denying
Trump
that
say
this is a
anything that
racist
was
country?
directly racist.
All right, guys.
Just a second. Let's be clear here. Are you denying that this is a racist country?
I'm denying
and
this
that
is a
Donald Trump
yes,
is
I
a
am. I
racist?
am. I'm denying this is a systemically racist country. That is the
Give me
lie
a
that has
break.
been told. That is the lie that has been told to African Americans in this country for decades on end.
No, it's been
Unbelievable.
proven that it's been
How has it been
proven
proven?
over the years that it's a
How has it
racist
been proven?
country.
Name me, give me an example.
We can go back to slavery and what happened.
Of course, you go back to slavery, but I'm not talking about slavery. I'm talking about systemic racism right
Okay, you
now.
want examples?
Where is
Systematically,
the
we've been-
systemic racism right now?
You want examples?
Yeah.
Mass incarceration.
Mass
That's
incarceration.
example number
Well,
one.
mass
African Americans
incarceration.
commit crimes at
I'm
levels
gonna
that
give
are
you a lot
far
of
greater
examples.
than other races.
Hold on.
Guys,
I'm going
No,
to give
we
you a lot of
haven't.
Yes.
examples.
Yes.
I'm going to give you a lot of examples.
stop.
Yeah, sure.
The data shows that we get much lower health care than the same situated white folks. That data has been in existence forever. Number two, we get loans at a less favorable rate, and when we do get it, and we don't get them as often as similarly situated whites. There are lots of studies on this.
Yeah,
There
right.
are
I know.
studies.
I know. There are
No,
things that you
well,
say that
hold
will
on,
spin
hold
it.
on. I'm not
But let's
done.
talk about healthcare.
I'm not
Let's talk
done.
about the
I'm
healthcare
not
aspect. There are
done.
cultural aspects that make the healthcare aspect much more difficult. There's a lot
don't
of
know
there
what
are
you're
a lot of
talking
things
about.
that are different in the Black community than in the white community, and not all of them have to do with racism, Billy.
All right,
I am
folks.
so tired of white folks who don't know the history of this country and how it presently affects us. There's a good book you ought to read. It's written by a white man. It's called Not in My Neighborhood. It gives the extensive, documented, overt
I'm sure there's
history
great
of
books. There's a book
Baltimore.
called Race Crazy that suggests that
Red
African Americans
line.
and the
All the
Democratic
books are
Party
wrong.
have been using
Okay,
this
got
issue to mess
Got
up the nation and the national
I got
conversation
it.
for decades.
All right,
All
we're
the
gonna.
books are wrong. There's no
Well,
racism in America.
Hey,
It's a myth that's made up by Black people. I hear you.
guys,
I'm glad to hear you say it because now I know who you are.
It's not a
Stop.
myth.
stop.
Conversation needs to change. The conversation needs to change around this issue.
It does need to change,
Howard.
but we also have to deal with reality and the
Guys,
fact that it is.
hold it.
I don't want my kids taught that systemic racism is real in
Dan,
school.
Dan,
Oh, you
But I
don't?
guess
Why
you
is
need to
that?
explain to your
Why don't
kids
you-
why we're in this situation and what happens.
What
And
am
yes,
I supposed to say
you
to them?
should-
Redlining? Is it teaching redlining? Because that's
Well,
40
no,
years
but
ago.
redlining
Look,
is factual.
I don't want to
Redlining
get
is-
this wasn't an issue about race before Billy brought it up. But let's just say that I think the narrative is wrong, and I think the narrative is damaging. I mean, we had just had Michael Brown's birthday. And you had all sorts of civil rights leaders saying, "Oh, Michael Brown, he would be something today if he wasn't shot." The guy charged police. The Black Lives Matter movement made up a huge lie about him having his hands up and not shooting. It was all based on lies. How are we supposed to deal with that if that's what these interest groups are doing?
guys,
Well, I'm sorry. Let me say this, Richard. One thing I'm gonna say. It's shameful that you are a racism denier, and I feel sorry for you.
I just
And
gave you
hope
an
nobody
example
pays
of
you anything.
how the Black Lives Matter movement built an entire movement on a lie. What do you say to that?
Give me a break. You
A
don't know.
lie. A
about.
lie about Michael Brown. A criminal who charged a police officer, tried to take his gun, didn't have his hands up, and you made a whole movement out of it.
all right,
Okay,
guys,
I
I'm
hear
sorry.
you, racism denier. I hear you.
Here's Howard Mallison again. Nice, lively chat, folks. Howard, give us some spots.
You know, Richard and I are proud to represent the law firm of Barry Glazer. Barry always goes that extra mile for his clients, whether it's been a personal injury, medical malpractice, or nursing home neglect. Barry and his staff, that include an in-house doctor and nurse, make no apologies for getting top dollar from the insurance companies. His clients are his best advertising. So next time you need a lawyer, give Barry Glazer a call at 410-547-8568. He gets results. Tell him Richard sent you. For special occasions, group get-togethers, or just date night, Pappas restaurants and sports bars belong on the top of your list. Enjoy their award-winning crab cakes, or as Richard calls it, the Fab Cake, and a great selection of steaks, seafood, and other mouth-watering treats. Pappas is Oprah's favorite, and they ship their crab cakes all over the country. 4 locations, including their newest sports bar and restaurant in Bel Air. Pappas food, service, and atmosphere is second to none. Okay, guys, back to you.
All right, so this was a very, very, very lively squirrel, feisty and really stimulating and interesting. I want to thank you, Rick Vatz. I want to thank you, Dan, Joseph, Billy Murphy, and Sheila. You ran a very good campaign. Congratulations. Sorry it turned out the way it did, but it did. Okay, folks, our audience has continued to grow significantly thanks to you and your friends at squareoff.net. I want to thank you all. Billy Murphy, I have to get you and Dan on a one-on-one. I think that'd be a
Sure.
He
nice.
couldn't handle it, Richard. He
What?
couldn't handle it. He wouldn't be
Well,
able to handle it.
I think most people would say that I handled it pretty well today. I will accept.
It depends
I
on
will
who your
accept your
audience
offer,
is.
Billy. Billy, I
If
will go
your
one-on-one
audience-
with you in front of a live audience on this issue.
Let me tell you something. Your audience is racist deniers, racism deniers. You did very well, but that's not real.
All
And I'm
right.
sorry that you
What
don't
is real?
The
What
reality
is
denier
real?
on the other side.
Have a safe.
Go down, brother.
You'll have the Trump verdict coming up on our next program, and also Brooks and Larry Hogan race for the U.S. Senate. We will see you next time when once again we heat up and square off. Bye-bye, everybody. Be safe.